Great, thanks everyone for sticking with us through the whole day. I'm excited to be here on stage with our three speakers that we invited to be here, as well as our local farmer, Mark de Respinis. So I want to introduce Mark first. He is the owner and operator of Esoterra Culinary Garden, which he began in 2018. In just a few short years, he has built the garden to service over 25 local restaurants. His hand-tended, gorgeous edibles are both delicious and exceptional. Esoterra began with just under 1 acre of vegetable and herb production and now cultivates over 2.5 acres. Mark uses relay cropping and plants as many as 20 successions each season. He relies on good quality compost and biological cocktails to create healthy plants. He leaves no bed left unplanted and always has roots in the ground. Mark utilizes several hoop houses and a greenhouse, which extend the growing season to almost year-round. In addition to the cultivated produce garden, he's actively reinvigorating perennial hayfields with grazing and compost applications through the Restore Colorado program. On the edges of the farm, he's planted trees and shrubs, makes his own compost, hosts extremely productive honeybee hives, and is improving the riparian areas and tidying neglected fence lines. He grew up in suburban Connecticut and studied history and literature. His love for food encouraged him to develop a farm at a resort in northern New Mexico. He was recently named the Small Acreage Conservationist of the Year by the Colorado Association of Conservation Districts. We are all glad Mark brought all his life experiences and passion for quality food to Boulder County. So help me welcome Mark to the stage as well. All right, so I have some questions for our producers, but I also want this to be interactive. So if you guys have questions, please enter them on the Slido and we will get those up here as well. So I think the first place I would like to start, you guys have all of you have accomplished so much. It's incredible what you've done on your farms over the years. So what are your future goals and some innovative technologies you want to try next? What are you looking forward to in the next few years? And it doesn't matter to me who starts. Does anybody have a burning idea? Bob does. Oh, it might. Just click it up.
Click where?
Push it up.
Is it working now?
Or we can trade.
Yes. Okay, you have to be smarter than the machine, right? Well, I'm just finishing the 5th year of my 3-year retirement program. Oh. And that means I sold my last business, my old business in September. I tried to sell my businesses to my employees so they could continue on the same place. And one of the things I'm really excited about, we've been able to increase the population of Big Sandy by 5.2% with all the excess businesses that we started. But now I'm going out of business, and I want to create a regenerative, organic research, education, and health institute in the middle of my farm. So we're going to donate 750 acres of the middle of our farm to create this institute. And so that's what I'll be working on for the next 5 years. We want to have field-sized plots for farmers to see with animal incorporation of animals and concentrated grazing as a part of the rotations, small plot work for research and trying to solve weed problems with perennial weeds and biological controls and things like that. We want to have a education component which helps farmers convert to regenerative organic and answer their questions either on their farm or on the institute. Have summer classes for families or students to come, interns, even sabbaticals, having a place where people can learn how to grow their own food. Some of them don't know how to plant a garden, so it has very basic gardening ideas. We'll probably invite you to help with that. And have instructors that people who really are loving and knowing gardening. And then have a culinary aspect where people can be taught and have a kitchen where they can be taught how to cook out of their garden, and also how to preserve, how to pickle, how to ferment, how to dry, how to can. And then we'd like to have a health component where we have a health practitioner on staff who focuses on or specializes in a chronic disease and can then prescribe not pills from the pharmacy, but food from the farm. So that's my goals for the next few years.
Wow, Bob. That's amazing. I'm coming to visit too. I'll be there. Anybody else have ideas, up and coming ideas that you want to try on your farm?
Oh, because it's working. I mentioned it in the presentation, but one thing that I think would be cool to try is the virtual fencing. With the elk that we have, they tear up so much fence and just cause, a lot of issues there. But something like a virtual fence that's up and coming would be really cool to try. So,
Thanks, Joe. Mark?
I'm interested in developing production models for different crops that maybe have not been explored too much. We've had a great response from growing varieties, different crops that Celtus, Bigarello, Agretti, different chicories, and they can really provide a lot of diversity in our diet in different seasons, and kind of reinvigorate that connection with the excitement of what can come out of the garden.
Mark, you already have the most amazing things at your farm. I can't wait to see the even more exotic and awesome things. That's super cool. Elizabeth, anything you want to add?
I'm honestly in sort of a maintenance stage, and partially with my personal life, but because we've been doing what we've been doing so long, one of the things that's I love doing is being very open to having people come learn, and also researchers. And so I'm trying to get more of that. Have been working with Berkeley and very open to other people coming, like study us and then study people who are newer, and let's just progress this on.
Yeah, all part of the learning for everyone. Yeah, fantastic. All right. Wyatt and Ann were up here earlier talking about some of the things they've been able to do with sustainability money and the STAR program. Just curious, we'll start down there with you, Mark. If I could give you $50,000, what would you do with it on your farm?
We've been exploring different opportunities to establish perennials to kind of nest the annual garden. And yeah, we have an opportunity to develop an agroforestry system in an adjacent plot that's currently occupied by prairie dogs, and we're working with the city to cover crop that and get the prairie dogs controlled and start to cycle nutrients and establish biology in that field. And it would be really great to do these broad scale plantings that of crops that I think I've loved to see thrive already in smaller ways, like wild plums and choke cherries and elderberries, and to develop those as ingredients also in local menus. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Joe, aside from virtual fencing, do you have any other ideas what you'd do with that money?
well, the first thing that came to mind was seed, but or cows, but also some agritourism things, little cabins and different things of that nature.
Cool.
One of the things I like to do is turn my liabilities into assets, and I try to have lots of ideas in case some turn out. And one that didn't turn out was, and it's been mentioned by you guys, we also have prairie dogs, and they're a terrible liability. But in Japan, they sell prairie dog puppies in the pet shops. And so I thought, they give you $100 a piece. They'll give you $100. And so they get them from Texas now. And in Texas, they're sucking the poor little prairie dogs out of the hole with a big vacuum, and most of them are injured, and when they get there, they're infected and they die. I was thinking, why not flood the prairie dog holes with water, and when they swim up, net them out like a fish, and there's no injury. And I had people from Japan come and look at my prairie dogs, and they thought this is a great idea. And when I found out how much trouble it was to send live animals across international boundaries, I just gave up. So if I had $50,000, I would hire somebody to try to complete that that chain in and solve my problems with that, because I still think it's a nice idea. It's better than poisoning them. So anyway, that's what I was going to do.
Okay, when you were answering, I was thinking, what question did I ask? Where are we going?
my answer after that.
Money, Elizabeth. We're handing you a lot of money.
You're handing a lot of money. Let's see. Well, our greenhouse structure could use replacing. And we did invest quite a bit into solar a couple of years ago, but it's not quite a lot for our irrigation needs in the summertime. So I would probably put it into the rest of solar and get a battery system in, because currently if PG&E, our electric company, turns off the power, we are not able to irrigate, and so I would like to be totally off-grid and green.
Great examples, thank you. You guys have all kind of talked about today your why. Well, Mark, you haven't, but if you could kind of describe ways that farmers or ranchers are making a difference in the world, what would you say? How would you answer that question? How are you making a difference in the world? Deep thoughts.
I mean, I think it's the way people light up when they experience the fresh harvested food, and when they experience flavors and tastes that they haven't previously tasted. And a lot of it comes back to plants, and it's there's such an incredible diversity of plants and edible plants out there that are not on our menu currently, and it's fun to present those to people and see how they respond. Yeah. So.
Cool, thanks. Joe, how do you feel like you're making a difference?
You know, sometimes I wonder if I am.
You are.
But I guess we can't all make a difference around the world, but we can make a difference in our community, whether it's just being an example to our family or to neighbors. You know, they might not listen when we try and go tell them something, but they're watching over the fence to see what you do and how you do it. And, you know, I think that has an impact, so.
Yeah, they are. It feels like the long game, you know. Bob, what kind of difference are you making? You make people laugh, I know that much.
Well, one of my heroes is Thomas Jefferson. And he said one time that one of the greatest contributions a person can ever make to a culture or society is the introduction of a new plant. And edible plants, he's talking about edible plants. And he said, and particularly a grain plant, or a grain. And I thought, oh, no wonder I love this guy. And so the most exciting thing to me, or one of the most exciting things to me is what we've been able to do with our Kamut project and really understand, and I talked about this earlier, about the value of food as medicine and how we can eat ourselves healthy in many, many cases. It's not a 100% magic pill or anything, but it's a way of life that if we would focus on the connection of food and health in this country, we would solve so many, and I'm not talking just healthy humans, but also health of the soil. It all goes together, and we've talked, many people have said this over and over. It all goes together, and if we could focus on that, rather than just how to make another nickel and get something cheaper or faster or more efficiently, but really strive to add to the health and nutrition of people in our community as farmers. To me, that brings me great satisfaction. And I love that about being a farmer.
I'm very idealistic. As you noticed, I'm an ex-Peace Corps volunteer, so I want to change the world. And some of that is just through feeding our community. And some of that is, I'm very heartened when people say, I didn't think I could do it, and you were the inspiration because you guys were doing it and you were talking about it. Sometimes talking about it can be hard, but if it allows people, if we've found a success in something and it allows other people to make a change, heck, let's keep going on it. So that for me, I just want to, like I said, maintenance, like keep going. We've been told before that, like there was legislation in the state of California, and oh, that can't happen. And someone's like, actually, I know of this farm and they are doing it. And so if that can be, and there are many other farms that are doing it who maybe aren't, speaking up. There are a lot of people doing good work, but if it can be inspiration or if it can stop the naysayers, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, well, thank you for, speaking up, all of you, for being here and, being part of that systemic change. So we appreciate you. We did get a question from the audience, which I really appreciate. Joe, can you explain what virtual fencing is, please?
So it's done by satellite. So there's satellites, but basically you train your cattle. You have a collar on them. It's kind of like a dog fence, electric dog fence, or a buried cable in the ground for dogs. But for cattle, you have a collar on their neck, and when you draw this virtual fence, on your computer, iPad, whatever it is, you draw your boundaries, and when they get close to that collar that they're wearing signals, I think it starts out with a sound. As they get closer or as they approach it, then there's a shock, kind of like an electric fence. And so they are trained and they learn not to cross that boundary. So you don't have a physical barbed wire fence, but just a virtual fence that they're trained to. Does that explain it good enough?
Thanks, Joe. So all of you working in the regenerative agricultural space, and maybe, I guess I want to direct this to Bob and Joe, because I would say that's not where you started your journey, but that's kind of where you are now. So do you see producers working more cooperatively as a piece of the regenerative solution? Or do you have any ideas for us about what that would look like, more farmers kind of working together?
I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah, I look at all my neighbors as future regenerative organic farmers. And so I don't badmouth them when they're out spraying. And we had a drift problem one time, and the spraying, actually, instead of spraying my neighbor's field, came and sprayed my field. And so we had a big discussion. What are we going to do about this? And no one has insurance to cover this kind of thing. And so I said to my neighbor, I said, okay, here's the deal. In those days, it was the California program we're working with, because it's only a 2-year requirement for organic certification. I said, and we're summer following, and you summer follow, most people are summer following, and they don't do anything in their field. So theoretically, if you summer follow 1 year and plant a crop the next year, you can harvest it as organic. I said, here's what we'll do. I said, we're just going to trade fields for 1 year, and you can have the field you just sprayed, and next year I'm going to have the field that you're going to plant this fall, and we'll just swap. And I thought, gosh, maybe he'll get so excited about organic that he'll convert. Well, that didn't happen. But I think that the more we can, right now in this country, there is so much divisiveness and division, and nobody talks to everybody anymore. I think it's time we start talking to our neighbor, and food is the easiest way to do that. Especially if you've got an abundance of cauliflower, whatever you might have an extra of in the garden, and just cook it up and just call up the neighbors and say, you know what, we got extra of whatever, or we're having a big stew tonight, or whatever, and have something that you've grown. And even if you're not a big farmer, if you're just a little farmer and have a garden, we can talk to our neighbors more, and we can do it over food easier, I think, than anything else. And it brings up the conversation naturally of where did this come from? And how did I grow it? And what's important to me, the way I grow it? And I think that it's not going to we don't have millions and billions of dollars to go on TV the way our adversaries do and tell how wonderful they are. But if everybody did one little thing like that, it adds up to a movement, and that's what I would like to see.
Thanks, Bob. Joe, what's your experience been?
It doesn't work around here. It's been my experience as far as when you just try and go out and talk to people. But with the drought that we've been experiencing, everywhere, but in our part of the state, I've never, up until this year, you don't hardly hear soil health talked about. And so I've been to some water meetings, this last year. And for the first time, people are talking about, okay, how do we save water? How do we, grow crops that are gonna, be more drought tolerant, but, and so soil health has actually been talked about for the first time that I can remember in some of these water meetings. So, guys are it's on their radar, where to me it didn't seem like it was before. And so just keep putting it out there. They say when the student is ready, the prisoner will appear. And I think if it just keeps getting out there in front of guys, it's not going to happen all at once, but it's starting to sink into some guys. And like Bob said, a lot of guys are doing a lot of great things, and it's hard to change. I mean, it's hard to jump into new practices when you've been doing something your whole life. So
I can say, though, that I have received more calls in the last year and a half, or maybe 2 years, about ideas with the rotations and how to change some things that we were, not that we're ready to jump completely into regenerative organic, but asking questions about that I received in the previous 30. So we're really starting to open up an area where people are starting to think about alternatives, because what's happening now is just a train wreck, and it's getting worse and worse. And so I think the time is right to be open to helping those people that before never considered such a thing.
Well, we appreciate all the work. Keep talking. Every year we say, should we do this, host this conference again? Should we do it? Should we do it? But over time, I think, we're in the same boat. Just keep talking about the benefits and why we're all here. So thanks for continuing to do that. Let's start on the end with you, Mark. This question came from the audience as well. If you could name one or just a couple, and I have been to your farm, so I know there's a couple, barriers or challenges that you have seen on your farm to adopting some of these regenerative practices. What barriers have you seen, and how did you overcome them?
We had some infrastructure barriers to begin with, because it was property that had been abandoned for many years. We've been exploring ways to establish these irrigation system, appropriate greenhouse structures for our process, wash pack area. That is a slow process, but I think it's important just to be resilient and to focus on the garden and the growing things, and that's been what I've done since I started farming. So I really haven't tried not to focus too much on the barriers and more on what can be done with what we have at hand. And I've had an amazing group of people come to grow with me over the last couple of years, and that's something I'm really excited about, is how we together are learning how to be more and more abundant in this farmy way. And I'm excited that we've moved through these barriers together as a team and continue to meet our goals and continue to grow. And I think that's really kind of the focus. And I'm excited for my crew and the people I've worked with to go out into the world and kind of replicate this system. We need kind of a dispersed agricultural economy to return. We need these resilient, small, scrappy and highly productive operations to be really everywhere. And so, I don't know, that's my answer.
Solutions oriented, looking at solutions. Yeah. Joe, do you have anything you want to mention?
Water, drought, water, but also, infrastructure water, watering livestock, can be a barrier for us, when anybody raising livestock. So something that comes to mind.
How have you addressed those?
We've put in one area a couple miles of water line just to water livestock that ties into our irrigation. And then there's some places where we just have to haul water when we don't get rain. So.
Thanks. Any one challenge stand out, Bob, over your career?
Sometimes I'm a hard learner, and so I had the idea of rotations down, I thought pretty good for cash crops, but I wasn't rotating anything with my cover crops, with my soil building crops. So I went from alfalfa for a bit, and then I was told that actually sweet clover is better than alfalfa, and I planted everything to sweet clover for my cover crops. And in our area in Montana, every 3 or 4 or 5 years, not too often, we have what we call a sweet clover year, and the pastures are covered with sweet clover. It just, the fall rains are just right. It's a perennial, so it comes, it's a 2-year biennial. It comes up in the fall, and then it blooms in the next spring. So if the rains are just right in the fall, it'll come up, and then the whole prairie will be yellow with yellow blossom sweet clover. It smells divine. Well, there's a yellow blossom sweet clover weevil that also comes along with that population feasting along, and then the next year there's a complete crash. And so when I was planting all my cover crop to sweet clover, when it was in the 2-leaf stage, I had the only lunch in town, you see, for these weevils. And they all showed up at my house, and they wiped me out. So my cover crop that year was completely destroyed because I had no rotation in it, and I just had one crop. And so it dawned on me then, actually I should be doing the same thing with my cover crops I'm doing with my cash crops, and that's rotating and having diversity. So if you have a problem like that, it doesn't wipe you all out. So it's just been, thankfully I haven't had anything that's just sunk the boat, but I've had lots of little fires and torpedoes that I've learned from along the way. And I've tried to change my operation so that I didn't have to repeat those problems.
When we were starting, it was honestly the knowledge. I mean, it took us several years of trial and error to figure out what we were doing. And I'm glad that that's not there as much, but we need more research, we need more books out there, and so forth. I was very excited to learn more about the 1,000 Farm Project. I think that'll advance it, and I think we need that even more. Another one that's wasn't a barrier to me, and maybe not, some of the other people on the stage, is access to land. My husband and I, in essence, inherited the family farm. In that farmland was sold in Illinois, and we bought far fewer acres in California. And many people don't have that. And I'm very thankful for the programs that are in place here. But in our area, that is like the #1 thing for young farmers. And there are a lot of young farmers who want to get started, and they don't have access to land. So I see that as huge.
Yeah, you're right. That is something we haven't talked about a lot here, but we know where land is very expensive here, that's a huge barrier. Okay, a couple more questions from the audience. We'll get to that one next. So before that, Bob, you spoke pretty clearly on organic plus regenerative, but I want to ask the other three, like, what do you see, like, what is the advantage to being certified organic versus not having the certification? Where do you fall on that idea?
We're not certified organic. And I think probably most people think we are, and I usually try to bring that up. I would be certified organic, except for early on, our members told us, we don't need to be certified organic, and we went through the process, and we just met all sorts of barriers, and we're like, we're too busy. We're gonna move on with the crop, and we've sort of continued that way. So I believe in organic. I'm not certified in organic, and I'm sorry, I sort of lost the question.
No, that was the question. You got it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
if there's value in the certification for you.
I believe there is value. We have a big farm name. We sell direct to end consumers, and so we can share our story, have people come out to our farm. There's so much value in organic. And if you're selling not directly to end consumer, you absolutely need to have it. So,
Mark or Joe, any thoughts on organic certification?
In 2015, we certified some wheat, and it was a pain. I mean, the paperwork and the stuff you had to prove and do. I guess my thought is everyone should be organic, and it should be those people that are having to spray and do all that stuff that should have to do all the paperwork.
Bingo.
I just think it's about relationships for us. Like, we have a very close relationship with our customers, and are very transparent. They come out to the farm, and a lot of the way that we build those relationships is through education about the way that we're growing and how we deal with different challenges as they arise. So, but that's a unique situation on our scale. But I feel like there's many relationships that can sustain a farm, and when there's that connection, then the certification's not really necessary.
Thank you. Thanks for your thoughts on that. So the next question that Lauren fleshed up from the audience, it was one word. It said bindweed ? So I think all of you have maybe said that word at some point today, and maybe Mark can share a little bit too. So who wants to tackle how you have tackled bindweed on your farm? Anyone?
Bindweed is it. It's one of our worst weeds, and we have found, and other people have found, that as you have a more regenerative system and as you have more fungally dominant soil, bindweed becomes worse. So for us, it's partially about the farmer footstep. It's about being intensive, and it's about being on top of it. I don't really have anything else.
Okay, can I put in a plug? Sure. Okay, so folks, when you're talking to your congressman, representatives, senators, or any of those kind of folks, I think that what we need in America is that for the USDA to allot the organic research money, or the research money that they have, should be allotted to organic at least in the same percentage that equals organic sales in the marketplace, which, as I mentioned earlier, pretty close to 6% now. Organic research from USA is close to 1%. So here we are. It would be like if we were 100 years ago and the Model T was just coming out and it needed lots of work, and maybe Henry Ford just came out with his car, and you could see it was going to work, but it was really in infancy, and yet the government was bent on perfecting the stagecoach. And that's what we're doing right now. And so if research should be for the future, not for the past. And I think, the bindweed, I mean, everybody's mentioned bindweed. It's a growing pain for us. And yet, I'm sure if we could find the right biological control in the form of bacteria or a fungus or something, that's what I'm working on right now, but it's still elusive. We don't have the research focus that we could have if we had more determination to put money into that. And that's what I think really needs to be done. We really need to focus on research for these kind of really problematic cases that haven't been solved, but could be solved. It's just a matter of finding the answer. I'm convinced that it's out there. So,
Thanks, Bob.
Bindweed is about as popular as prairie dogs down where we're at. And, everyone's trying to deal with it different ways. I guess I've just tried to, ask myself, why is it there and what purpose is it serving? It is a root in the ground, and the cattle will eat it. I still don't like it, but trying to figure out what purpose it serves and how I can utilize it and what'll grow with it. And the rye that I've planted has helped it a little bit. And like I say, they'll still eat it along with their rye. So that's how we're dealing with it.
Really, all the practices that Elizabeth was talking about in her presentation that we've implemented here, there's sort of a cloud effect where if you're, on top of keeping every bed planted, you are doing some quick crops that may be only in the ground for 20 days or 40 days or whatever, and then you're turning that bed right away as soon as it's done. And then also you're not needing to deal as much in the no-till system with annual weeds. So there's kind of the opportunity to allocate resources towards taking care of bindweed problems as they arise. And it's, all hands on deck at certain points when it's particularly bad on a bed of direct-seeded carrots. But yeah, it's become less of a bugaboo in my mind as like the whole system comes into greater productivity and seems to be more effective as a whole.
Okay, good luck with your bindweed. All right, let's go down the line. Elizabeth, what's the question you're most tired of hearing on this subject? And what would you like to say about it so you never have to answer it again?
On this subject,
Yeah,
the
just-
regenerative
yes, ma'am.
agriculture.
Yes.
I think I addressed it a little bit before, is are you going to scale up? You know, like, what you're doing is a good thing. I want to see it on 200 acres. That just annoys me. Like, no, that's the way that our economy has gone in the wrong direction. We need more small farmers everywhere. It's better for people, it's better for the ecology, it's better for everything. Okay. Yeah.
My most frustrating question is, why is organic or regenerative organic food so expensive? And my answer to that is, why is chemical food so cheap? And that, until we have an understanding of that, that is my most frustrating question to try to answer over and over, because I think it's so central to how we think. If we think of food in isolation and we want it as cheap as possible so we can go use the rest of our money to play, or of course now maybe to pay our house mortgage or whatever, but still, I think we really need to rethink our priorities. And if we connect food and health, and you're going to be tired of me saying that, but I think it's so important, if we really connect food and health, even doubling the price of food is not expensive. If we can bring down the cost of healthcare to where it used to be, then we're still going to be ahead. But I think that's the most off-the-cuff question. How are people going to pay for this? That kind of question. And there's ways. I mean, you don't have to start with organic frozen pizza, you know, or something that's really expensive, all processed. Start with the tomato and grind your own wheat and get some chives from your neighbors or whatever and make your own pizza. And then you can do it easily and cheaply. I think that we just need more imagination and more determination that we're going to eat better and find ways to do it. If we don't have enough change, there's cheaper ways to do it.
Thanks, Bob.
Maybe my circle of friends isn't very big, or I don't talk to enough people, but I guess I don't know of a question that I get, but I hear a comment that it doesn't work here. And, you know, there might be certain practices that don't work here that work for Elizabeth or, you know, certain areas, but the principles are still the same. The principles of soil health, you know, those are the same, and those will work anywhere, even if you're in the desert or you know, in 30 inches of rain. But so that's the comment, not necessarily a question.
No, I can appreciate that. And I really appreciate you bringing the videos, you know, so we can see what it looks like, all of you, you know, where you live, because it isn't the same, but there are so many things that are the same, and that is a common thing we hear. Mark, anything? You guys are all so positive. Nothing bothers you?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the questions are always an opportunity to explore things that if I'm tired of answering it, then I need to think of a different way to explore what's being presented. But for some reason, I'm thinking about winter farming, like how do you farm in the winter? I don't want to put that question to rest. I want to like turn it back on people and say just how exciting it is to discover what grows in those marginal times of year. And there's an image in my mind from a movie called The Tree of the Wooden Clogs, where a group of a village of farmers in northern Italy has made it through the long winter, and they're kind of fanning out into the fields and along the ditches with baskets and knives, and they're cutting the young greens that are growing along the ditches. So you have like chicories just sprouting and dandelions just sprouting and wild lettuce and all these greens that are just growing there. and without taking for granted our food system, you can imagine like how much of a celebration that is to encounter greens again for the first time after a long winter. So I think that sense of wonder and opportunity at the edges of what we know is exciting to me. And that's not an answer to the question. But.
That's okay. Those are good thoughts. All right, to wrap it up, think about it for a second before you jump into your answer, but is there anything that we haven't talked about today that you haven't gotten to say that you would like to address to all these many fine folks who are still here? What haven't we talked about?
Why'd you pass this to me? Where do you want to start? You going to start at that end? You can start. Oh, I can.
I don't know. We can just have you guys fill out the evaluation too.
You know what we haven't talked about too much is how we can share our story. I ride on a lot of airplanes. I talk to a lot of people wherever I go because I enjoy talking to people. And I was amazed. I was at UC Davis a few months ago, and one of the gals I'm working with some plants made some very derogatory remarks about organic, and showing a real ignorance of what we're really trying to do, and this basis of healthy soils and that sort of stuff. I think there is so much misunderstanding and of course there's been some on purpose from our detractors that want to sell chemicals, bad information, that we need to tell our story more, and not just to each other, and it's fun to talk to each other, but we need to talk to the rest of the folks that aren't in this room and that don't really know. I sat next to a guy, of course he sells chemicals, on the plane from Great Falls to Denver. And I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. He started out telling me he was in the crop protection business. They don't use the term chemical salesman anymore. He's in crop protection. I said, okay, that's great. But we got talking about organic. He said, I never eat organic. He says, those plants are under such stress because they're not fed properly, that they're just full of toxins. I would never eat organic anything. And I thought, wow. I'd never heard that before. And so I think we need to, and I wasn't shy about pulling out some of my slides from my presentation today and showing them some of our experiences on our farm and our research, published peer-reviewed journal articles. And we ended up having a very nice conversation. And he was very open to, at least politely open to what I had to say. Most of them, most of the normal chemical guys, they just shut you down, and you're just heretics. But for those that are in between and just our neighbors, and I think we need to show up at our schools and talk to classes. We need to show up to neighborhood gatherings and just talk freely about, not the better than thou type of thing, but just what we're trying to do and the importance of what we're trying to do, just in general to people who don't know. We haven't really talked about how to do that, and it's not so simple, but we can do it individually just almost everywhere we are in a very natural way, and I think that can be really important.
Thanks, Bob. Anybody else? Final thoughts?
Bringing more people in. You were talking before about not, talking to the choir, but also recognizing, of the four of us up here speaking, or all of us, we're all white. 3 of us are landowners. I'm the only female. How can we bring more people into this? Because our community is more broad than that. So that's something we always need to work on.
Okay, I have an idea about that. So look around your neighborhood and see who your neighbors are. So in my neighborhood is an Indian reservation. Yeah. And so I've been working with them for several decades now, and now they're really into food sovereignty, because that's getting to be a big thing, because they are concerned that maybe there might come a time when the government won't show up with all their food and all their money. And so they're becoming very interested in growing their own food. And I thought, wow, this is a perfect opportunity. So we're helping with, I think that we can reach out and help our neighbors. I mean, they're always kidding me about, well, you know, you stole all my land and everything. So one day for a birthday, I took one of my native friends a bag of soil out of my garden. I said, well, here's some of your land back. I thought it was quite a clever joke. He didn't, and he laughed quite a bit. But when you get to the point where you can laugh and joke with your friends, then you know you have really arrived. And just to be neighbors, and just to be kind, and just to be thoughtful, and just to be part of the community, because people, the diversity that, every community has some diversity, but how do we treat them? How do we interact with them? That's our choice. You know, they don't have to have a farm or anything to be in need of a friend, sort of thing. When my father grew up in our neighborhood, it was, people came in, there was big groups came in from Eastern Europe. They didn't speak the language very well. They were really discriminated against. And there was lots of hard feelings. In my generation, growing up, we hardly knew who was from where. And at my kids, it's completely gone. I mean, now the community is completely meshed together. But our community 100 years ago was very segregated. Mm-hmm. And I don't see why we just can't just do that in a natural way and not have to make a big scene about it. I think sometimes making a big scene is more divisive than just being kind to one another. And so that troubles me a little bit, because I hear it taken to the extreme. Rather than just doing something good and kind, everybody is making a big scene about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Our own individual actions go a long way. All right, you two on the end. Final thoughts?
I just think there's a huge market to capture for regenerative agriculture projects in all different domains. And I think also that that there's narratives that are old. When I first walked into the Farm Service Agency, arriving back in Boulder, they told me that the most anyone had reported, you know, per acre in organic production was $60,000 or whatever. And, you know, as Elizabeth showed in her operation, and we've discovered in ours too, you can do significant multiples of that and be more productive than I ever could have imagined on a small amount of land. And everything we grow, we sell. So it's like, it's relationships, it's the market that's just hungry for meaning and for story. And it's also putting the resources that we have in our community back into the land, and redirecting those dollars from these industrial agricultural operations elsewhere into the land here in Colorado or wherever we might be, and then seeing the community benefits that result from that. So.
Thanks, Mark. All right, Joe.
I was just going to say amen to what Bob said, but you know, my final thoughts, I think everything's mostly been covered, but I think the thing that comes to mind is just building on common ground. You know, I think everyone, whether you're conventional or organic or regenerative, I mean, and whether you're a gardener or a livestock producer, we all want what is best for our families, for our land. We just see it differently, and we just need to build on those commonalities and, you know, share experiences. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for this shared conversation. Help me thank our panelists this afternoon.